So I figured for the conclusion we could talk about making a spherical. Sphericals are just one of those kind of tool tests that I do in HardOps just to kind of test things and just see how things are performing. It's like a knuckle popper of sorts. So really users shouldn't struggle with this process, for it is just a process that one could go through to test the tools to make sure they're working the way they're supposed to. So we'll start off with a sphere cast, except I'll jump it up to level 4 as I often do in order to get a smooth result. We'll click on the auto smooth button and just 30 in order to auto smooth it at 30. Pretty much the same as if we sharpened it. However, if we were to sharpen it, this would happen, which we don't want to happen. That's as a result of us creasing the edges, which makes sub D and cast work a little bit harder to get a spherical shape, and that's why it's actually bigger than usual. So we'll just select both of these, and under booleans we'll choose inset. And with our inset on this very simple shape, we can adjust our parameters and everything's pretty dynamic. I did a video previously where I was talking about HardOps versus box cutter and just kind of how we have a bit of overlap between both of them in order to allow us to try unique solutions with each of them to try to have multiple iterations at the same idea. So while I have this shape that's now receiving inset and a slice, I'm going to uniquify it so that way I can perform an ever scroll and bring the shape back, and I'm just going to turn off visibility so I can press Q and adjust the solidification. And we see that by adjusting the solidification of this uniquified cutter, we actually put a shell around this. And I'm going to try to keep things brief for this so that way this video doesn't get too long. But next thing from here is I'm just going to Shift A, add a cube. I almost jumped into box cutter, old habits die hard. And we'll just select both of these and perform a difference. And using the F9, we could choose whether we want our solver to be fast or exact, but just know that if you use exact, it's going to get a lot slower over the course of you continuing to use Blender. So usually I use fast for as long as possible, and only exact if I absolutely need it. So looking at this from the top, we're just going to add another cube, and we'll just Shift A, select them both, and just perform a difference, which will give us a result something like this. And we can just perform an ever scroll with booleans and just recall this, and perform a difference, and we see that something just did not work out here. So we move this around and we see that it works in some areas but not in others, which is quite strange. I wasn't expecting such catastrophe, but let's roll with it. So continuing on, we'll just look at this from the top, and I'm just going to add another cube, and we'll just grab these two objects and perform a slice through our Q menu. Everything's always delegated to the Q menu in these videos. And from here we can also just bring in another cube. Just notice how I'm just always using cubes. It kind of is old school now at this point to do things this way when I know that I can just use box cutter and really just make mincemeat of a mesh in moments. But it's also fun to just go without. So here we are symmetrizing this, and we'll just bring this down, grab the boundary, and we want to flatten this out or make it solid. So I'm just looking at this, kind of debating on how we deal with this shape. We could just extrude like so and just S, Y, 0, and that will suffice. And then of course clean mesh to remove any extra geometry. We'll select both of these and just perform a slash. And I'm looking at the clock to see how long I'm in on the video, and we can just let's go ahead and just take this moment to smart apply, the smartest thing to do right now. And we'll select these 2 points and just perform a bevel. So even though I kind of destroyed the curvature right there for a second, it doesn't matter because we're actually going to be terminating all this area and just bringing it in like so. In order to get this result, we could Alt X and mirror. So always press X to reset the mirror. One of my favorite functions of mirror. Not sure who came up with that, but resetting mirror with X is just the bee's knees to me. So things didn't work out with us trying to bevel this, and I must know why. Let's try that again. Let's select everything, Shift N to check those normals, and it looks like we have a normals issue. It's not going to make itself visually apparent to us, so we got to press Alt V and go to face orientation. And let's just look at this, and everything's looking good. I guess we don't have a normals issue. Pardon me. We'll just keep going. So we already smart applied on this, which means that we can just slide this back, grab this bevel, And with me and these sort of things, I always work non-destructive for a period of time, and then I begin applying things in order to begin progressing to the next level, because I don't know, it's just the way Blender is. Trying to keep everything live for as long as possible is also fun. It's a fun way to challenge yourself, but it could also result in you having a little bit of modifier madness near the end there. So sometimes there's less madness in just applying things sometimes, but that's just a tip from me. So now we've performed a difference on this. We can actually look at the front, and we'll select both of these and perform a difference, except we want to bring back this shape because we don't want a difference. We want to solidify it and then perform a difference. And we can start worrying about taking away some not so deep areas, because if we cut all the way through, it'll get boring. But if we begin working our way through the surface just a little bit at a time, we can keep things interesting until the end as far as creating interesting shapes here. But like I said, this is a type of tool test that I do. Sometimes I'll just wake up and get on the computer BSing with the team and just be cutting some sphericals. There I am about to use box cutter for this. And when we do the box cutter update that's coming out, I'll also be doing a demo for that more than likely. And it looks like we can bring it in on this auto smooth, but we don't want to bring it in so much that we start catching the wrong area. And so about there is good. And then we can shift A, add a cylinder, we'll sharpen it just to smooth it out. And basically also give it auto smooth. Select both of these, perform a difference, Q, solidify. Let's say we want this even smoother. Let's alt click on subdivision, which will give us a subdivision first on the stack, and then we can just put a decimate at the end to get rid of any redundant geometry. And here we are looking at our shape so far. So just like that, we've gone in and just made a very quick spherical without a whole lot of work, just a warm-up. You could literally detail on these as long as you want. In fact, sometimes I apply a certain stack of modifiers only to add an entirely brand new stack of modifiers. I'm just checking to see if there's any doubles in between these edges I'm trying to select. And we want to select here to here, but we don't want that selected. And just a couple of counter bevels just to work against the bevels that we have. We'll symmetrize that to the other side. And things are looking good so far with our sphere. We're looking pretty. We're feeling pretty. Just kidding. So what I'll do at this point is hold shift and shift click smart apply. And that will allow me to grab a derived version of a mesh just for a moment. And we can just delete everything else that isn't what was selected. And let's just start cleaning up crime in this city. So we just want to get rid of some extra points that aren't needed. We can press GG and hold Alt to kind of extend it beyond the initial point that exists. And we can do the same thing here. GG, hold Alt to extend it past the point in which it exists. And we'll just grab these 2 points and press Ctrl Shift B in order to bevel these points and just roll the wheel. And from here, we can actually go under Mesh Tools and choose Curve Extract. Sometimes my brain wanders while I'm pondering my next move, but there should be no pondering here. And for some reason, the smooth shading just looks so weird right there, and I may never know why. So let's actually convert to mesh, and we'll just mark it sharp and ignore that we ever saw that. Let's just mirror this across. And that did not work out. Let's try it again, Alt X, and we mirrored using symmetry. We don't want to do that. We want to press X, my favorite mirror hotkey, to reset it back to the most defaultest of default settings that would be required. And we could even, from this point, about to use a little box cutter. Let's not. Nothing against box cutter. And we will Control click Curve Extract, which will give us a new mesh. We could press Alt S to bring it out. We could S Y to bring it in. And to get my edge boundary selection, I have this mapped to Shift tilde, but it's under Select Loops, under Select Boundary Loops. And you can just press F, and we'll just put a bevel on that, and maybe roll the wheel. Control A, apply to scale, and wonder why our auto smooth just looks so terrible. Let's give it sharpening, and that'll actually do the job. I was about to hit it with some sub D first, just to let you know, like sometimes I'll look at some rounding and it's just an unacceptable state. So when it can be helped, you best deal with it. But if it can't be helped, then it just can't be helped. But just know that most cases it can definitely be helped. You know, my motto is, you know, to mitigate where you cut your corners at to an area where the corners you're cutting won't be noticed to be cut. But if your corners are being cut right in front of my face, I'll have to ask about that. Be like, hey, see some cut corners here. You should mitigate those to the back of the model. So we'll just bevel this in solid mode so we see what's happening. And this bevel just kind of looks a little weird, but you know what? We won't talk about that. E, Y, and let's just delete that edge. Let's delete that edge, select these verts, Control Shift B, bevel. Such a complicated hotkey sometimes. And from this point, we can just curve extract. And we see why things got weird. So let's Control A, apply our scale. And we never applied our scale when we were dealing with that area. So that's just something we will have to live with. But just know that I will be awake at night thinking about why I didn't apply scale at that point. So we'll just bring this in, select both of these, mirror to the other side. And that'll just be my cross to bear. So here we are just looking at just the very quickest of sphericals. In fact, a very popular trick that I like to play with every morning is reverse bevel, where you perform a boolean and then you select a cutter and select just the top face and control click mark in order to bevel it in a reverse fashion. And that gets you something like this, which is always just nice to see on a model. So we could Shift A, bring in a cube. Let's bring our cube out. You know, really just slayed this thing with cubes. Cube warrior, hashtag cube warrior. So, just kidding. There's greater cube warriors out there than I. In fact, I feel like there's still another 10,000 hours to put in just a cube to truly unlock all of the mysteries behind it. So let's Shift A, bring in a cube, adding another 3 experience points to our gauge. It's like just killing bunnies over and over, just with cubes. And cubes are the geometrically least expensive shapes you can use for a boolean, might I add. With circles and spheres and cylinders being the most expensive. You start cutting into those, you're putting in 32 rounds of WTF in your mesh, and you'll have to deal with that someday. So always think about how many loops I'm putting in via the boolean, via the bevels that I have on my cutters. If that's something that I want to deal with later, we'll modify or mirror that to the bottom. And let's actually bring back this shape through our ever scroll, and I'm going to Shift D it to duplicate and just give us a unique version. And we'll make this sink into this shape, but how far is the question? Maybe like so. And this is giving us a rather unique result. So let's Shift A, bring in a cylinder, one of these 32 round bad boys straight to the dome. And we can just bring this out, and we'll just select both of them, perform a difference, then just use a ever scroll to bring back our last cutter. Whenever you use ever scroll, it automatically defaults to the last cutter, which is one of my favorite behaviors about it. Also feels like my modal distance is a little out of control, right? I'm having to move the mouse a mile. That's something that you can always adjust in your preferences if that's an issue, but we'll just keep rolling. Scale it down. We don't want it too dominating, but just enough. And we could even bring that back, select this area, put our origin there. Let's just Shift D, place it here, and also perform a difference, giving us 3. 3 is better than 1. And this is us looking at our spherical so far. So really we could just keep on keeping on with this thing until it's as detailed as the day is long. But I wanted to keep it real brief to just kind of show a little bit of me using this latest HardOps in action to you know, inspire, hopefully, not to ever demotivate. Sometimes users report that you know, they see these tool demos and they're like, oh man, I'll never be able to get that good. I sure hope you do, man, because these are knuckle poppers. You should be able to do these just to say, you know, I just warmed up with the tools now. I'm ready to get to the real work ahead. So I'm going to Shift A, add another cube. I bet you did not guess that. And we'll press SZ and just bring this in. And let's grab these edges. And before we can even bevel them, we need to apply scale in object mode. You know, thinking ahead. And let's just select both of them, difference. But we actually want that shape back. But we don't want that shape back. We want a solid duplicate. So by shift clicking shade solid, it will duplicate the shape and give you a solid version. And then we can actually scale this version down. We can press I, inset, extrude it back, and just place it in our form. Select both of them, mirror it to the other side. And this is us just adding some additional detail to this particular area just on the fly. So like I said, you could just continue detailing the shape all day, and this process hopefully should assist users with you know, getting acquainted with the toolkit that they're looking at, because in a way this is all Blender. You know, you got to understand Blender. That's the main thing. In fact, I'm going to power save this. Powered by power save. We'll call this Spherical. Almost typed in power save because I was saying that. We see it's Spherical number 20. And let's talk about promoting this to a bevel. So let's look at the shape. If we were to just go in and press Q and control click bevel, we're going to get a result like this. So it's like, how do we make this work out? How do we make this work out? Well, first of all, the bevel didn't even get all the way across the form. So let's go in and alt scroll bevel to roll it back a little bit. And we just want to grab the right areas. We want to alt click sharpen to put away at normal, and that suffices. We can send that on and call it a day, except this, and this. These things won't go. So how do we solve them when the modifiers are still alive? Well, that brings me to one of my new favorites of Blender 2.8 era, and that's the weld. So we can just roll the weld until we eat our lunch, and then roll it up one in order to bring it up just enough to help the bevel, which is just my favorite way to interface with weld when it comes to HardOps. We could take this piece, for example, and just control click bevel in order to do the same thing. And we see that, you know, things look okay. In fact, alt clicking sharpen, we could probably help that area a little bit. Whenever it comes to rendering, I'm less obsessive about these areas, because, you know, once you have the materials on, everything just kind of goes together and the bevel just really takes front row. However, this area is just such a curiosity to me. Let's press Alt V and just look at the wireframe. You know, and I think it's that weld is just eating some serious lunch down there. And we can just press Alt V, turn off wireframe, and that area will live. So this area is an interesting one. One of the cuts that people often ask about is how I do, well, radials. So let's just select both of these, select slash. And what I want to do is Shift A, add a cube, and reset its position. And we'll just position it here. And just scale this out. And this is our cutter so far. And if we were to control click radial array, it'll radiate, but we need to apply to scale. So let's go in and click it again, and we see that we're now radial arraying around our cursor, but our cursor isn't centered. So we need to press Shift C to get our cursor back in the center. And then from here, we can control click radial array in order to radial array this around the form. And we'll just select this and Q in difference to perform one of these cuts. And so now we have little ticks happening along the top, and we could even continue on with our modification onslaught of just bringing back one of these bad boys, the classic long boy Bud Ice cube. And we'll just control A, apply our scale, grab these two edges, and I'm almost at the 20-minute mark. And we could just select both of them, difference, and we performed a difference using fast. But I'm going to bring this in and let's promote this to a bevel as well. And we see that things almost work out, except that there's a little bit of spice happening near these edges. So same trick, we'll bring in a weld and just roll the weld until we eat the bevel's lunch. And we may want to bring it back a little bit because we're eating the wrong bevel's lunch. But now when we roll it up one, we see that we get a nice looking shape, because with the weld modifier there's not a lot of feedback happening. So using it after the bevel just kind of lets you know about how much distance that you're eating. And so same thing here, we can just promote this, and this geometry is actually a lot simpler than it should be. And because it's destructive, we can clean this up ourselves like a boss, because really these things are often caused by just near misses. If we really wanted to baby this area, we could, but we would need to also apply some things. So instead it's just easier to mitigate it. Also, in the grand scheme of this model, how many people are going to be zooming in exactly right here and critiquing your work to tell you how terrible you are? Probably not a lot. Such negativity probably isn't needed in your life as it is, but you know, we want to continue on. Let's take a look at this. So we finally have almost nailed all of our pieces. In fact, if we look at this, we can see that the bevel didn't actually catch that area. Now it looks good. And we could even clean this up just a tad, and that will mitigate the shading issues happening on the other side. So if we control click bevel, we can now bring this back in, and this is our result so far. So it looks like we also will need our boy weld, and we just roll it in just a little bit, bring it up one, and that is as good as it gets. I mean, we could take it even further and could just continue modifying and refining this until the end, but I'm just going to control click blank material to just slap a random unique material on everything. And from here, let's just jump it over to render and just see what our results are so far. We'll select this and just control roll through material scroll until we find just the right material. We'll select this piece, roll through material scroll on control click until we just find a nice shade of metal that suits our needs. And this is our result so far. Keep in mind, I also enjoy Shift A, adding a cube, pressing Q, and using sphere cast in order to cast it into a sphere. And then of course giving it a sub D level of 4. So we could bring it in probably about maybe about there. Alright, and we want to smooth it, but we don't want to sharpen it because the same issue from before will happen. But let's just Shift A, add a cube, maybe turn on our overlay so we can see what's happening. And we'll select it all the way to here, select both of them, difference, and with this shape we can just shift click blank material to just give it a glass. And now this is our result. So it's just a sphere under glass. I always enjoy putting these objects under glass, and then from here pressing Alt V B and just scrolling through various light setups till I find something that truly flatters the surface, and then Alt V B or Alt V V, sorry. And we can start going through the environments. So something like that will do the job for this. And after turning off overlays, we can now see the result of just a quick 20 minutes of just warming up inside of HardOps, just playing around. So with that, I'll wrap up this video and I'll see you guys next time, and thank you for watching.